Gear up, because this is the Fuel Your Marketing podcast, designed to accelerate sales and grow your business. Let's welcome your host, Arti Sharma.
Welcome back to another episode of Fuel Your Marketing podcast. I'm your host, Arti, and today we're diving into a topic that can make or break SaaS companies: scaling high-performing sales teams and executing winning go-to-market strategies. And today I'm very excited and thrilled to have Umair Ahmed join us. Umair is the general manager of a SaaS technology company and a seasoned startup executive as well. Umair, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Arti. It's a pleasure, and I'm glad to be here.
Thank you for carving out the time. Pleasure's all mine. Hey, listen, I'd love to, for our listeners to know a little bit more about you. So tell us who you are, what you do, and your last experience. And tell us also what people can find on your LinkedIn.
Absolutely, would love to. So thanks for the introduction. I'm Umair. As already mentioned, I'm the general manager for Defigo, based here in the Americas. I live just outside of Toronto in the Niagara region, where it's a bit quieter, more nature. But really what I do at Defigo is a Norwegian prop tech. We specialize in property access control and intercom solutions. So we've built a next generation video intercom that we believe is a game changer for multifamily real estate owner operators. And my job is to oversee the growth and expansion in the U.S. and Canadian markets. Overall, in my career, I've been very fortunate to be a part of the Toronto startup ecosystem, predominantly in sales as an individual contributor and leadership roles. So right before Defigo, I was lucky to have co-founded a restaurant tech startup, which we ended up winding down because of funding challenges during the pandemic, but was a phenomenal experience. And I was very fortunate to work with an amazing team. In terms of what's not on my LinkedIn profile, well, one of the things that I've been trying to get better at, especially being a father, working in a startup scale-up environment, is develop hobbies outside of work and just focusing on the family. And I wanted to get back into sports. So this year I made an effort to really hone in on NFL, learn everything about the game, decide what team I like, and ended up supporting the Buffalo Bills that didn't make it to the Super Bowl, but played a phenomenal season. The Super Bowl is coming up on Sunday, and I'll be rooting for the Eagles because, I'm sorry to say I'm not a Swiftie.
Well, for me, at Super Bowl is all about the advertising and marketing and who's got the best one out there. So for me, I'm watching the game just for that. Besides, I don't have a team that I support, but as a marketer at heart, I love to see what's creative and what's new. Well,
The ads are the best part.
yeah, no, 100%. So, you've had this incredible journey about scaling go-to-market functions in multiple companies. You, as you said, talk to me a little bit more about it. And for those of you who are listening, we're diving into this, playbook today on how to kind of have a successful SaaS business and organization that you could build. So everything around GTM, everything from ICP buyers and in between partnerships and every other motion that Umair has had experience, we're going to dive into that. So please, if you're a GTM founder or a SaaS founder, please stay tuned. So incredible journey, scaling sales teams. Talk to me a little bit about what drew you to SaaS organizations. Like, how did you get into SaaS?
It's a good question. To be honest, I actually stumbled on it. I was lucky to go to the University of Toronto, and I was studying political science and sociology at the time. And I was very involved in youth politics. I was privileged to work at federal, provincial, and municipal level politics. And a lot of it was, picking up the phone and engaging voters or knocking on doors and convincing them why they should vote for one candidate or the other. And then when I graduated, I did have an opportunity to move to Ottawa, get more deeper involved in politics. But the opportunity would have been something behind the scenes, very research oriented. And what I realized is I love talking to people. I love being at the forefront. And a mentor of mine said, "Hey, a lot of the skills you've developed, Amir, they're quite transferable to sales. You picked up the phone and you cold called and you knocked on doors, and effectively what you're selling is a candidate, and you could do that in tech." And at the time, the Toronto tech ecosystem was just coming up, and there was a lot of demand for talent. And I was very fortunate to be connected with two amazing co-founders. They were building an accounting startup, tech startup in the Toronto area, and they took a bet on me. I had obviously no previous sales experience, and I started off as a BDR and was at the company until they got acquired. So it was a combination of luck, having the right mentors guiding me, and then I guess timing.
Wow, luck by chance. You have to take chances. You could get lucky, but if you don't take chances, and looks like, and you did put in the hard work. When you said about knocking doors, it kind of had a flashback memory for me. Back in the day when I was starting out my career, I was with a franchise IT franchise organization and kind of running their sales division at the time. And there were no there were mobile phones were just being introduced. Not going to age myself with all of this, but yeah, those days it was knocking on the doors, and I feel that somehow some of that has kind of we've lost some of that, right? And that I also think that humanization could have done wonders to mental health for professionals, and I think that humanization, that human factor, is missing quite a bit. So what an incredible journey! Thank you for sharing that. Now you had a startup, and then COVID was the funny times, and funding wasn't available, as you said. But there's a lot of startups that struggle with how to take their product to market. They may not have been done at product market fit, but they have an idea, they build something. So tell me a little bit about, in your experience, what are the key elements for any founder who's listening, has a great product? How do you scale and take your product to market, and what can drive predictable revenue?
It's a great question, and it's one that, despite the experience that I've had, I think about almost every day. The challenges evolve as the market has evolved and consumer demands and preferences have shifted. What I've realized is that you need to kind of break it down into a science. Yes, there's a bit of an art into it, but the more methodical and objective you can be in your approach, the better the chances or the probability of you succeeding are. There's a phenomenal, I want to call it article or paper out there by Mark Roberge, who's a former CRO at HubSpot. Now he's in the venture capital world. And he really breaks down the science, if you will, of scaling a startup. And then I've used those insights quite a bit in my own career. And I think it really starts fundamentally with understanding what stage of growth you're at. And the way Mark breaks it down is there's really three core stages. So as you just outlined, the first is product market fit. You want to understand, do I have product market fit before you do anything else? I think what a lot of founders get wrong is falsely not being able to quantify what product market fit is and falsely believing that they have product market fit. So the way we look at it typically, or I've looked at it, is that product market fit is a bit formulaic, and you need to understand, how do you generate consistent customer success? So it's not that, hey, we have a product and there's a need for it in the market and I think customers will love it. It's a bit more scientific than that. There's different startups from Slack to Salesforce that took this approach, and they had their own formula. And for us at Defigo, what we've learned is that if a customer or property installs one of our intercom systems, has it up for 30 days, and we get about 50 usages in terms of unlocking the main door, we know we have product market fit. The chances of churn in that scenario are very, very low. So if you're in that stage and you're just starting off, that's exactly what you need to be solving for. When you move beyond that, then you're in go-to-market fit phase, which is about scaling in a sustainable way. And this is where you can hone in on other unit economics, such as LTV to CAC ratio. You want to make sure that's, 3 times the customer acquisition cost. You want to have a payback period of under 12 months, and you want to have sales and marketing efficiency. So in this phase, you're focused a lot on building repeatable, scalable process. And then if you're really lucky and you get to that final stage, it's about growth and moat. So this is about scaling and defending your market position. And I've been fortunate to work for companies in all three of these stages. So my approach has been different. But I want to elaborate on that, because I think if you go to the fundamentals, I always start with clarity on ICP. Do you know what your ideal customer profile is, and do you know who you're selling to? What is the value proposition? What do they care about? And then once you define that very clearly, only then can you start building repeatable, structured sales process to get them from end of the funnel to the next. And on top of that, you need to ensure that you have really strong alignment between sales and marketing as far as demand generation is concerned.
Yeah, and I think companies have to stop focusing on some short-term revenue goals, as you had mentioned earlier to me off before we started. At the end of the day, those three stages, I love them, like product market fit, your go-to-market, and you said scale and
Moat.
well, yeah,
So defensibility.
yeah, 100%. And I think sometimes people have this illusion about, that I'm ready for that go-to-market stage. And that's when you really need those mentors, the network. You need a focus group of people to tell you how it is and how they see your product, and see if there is an enhancement that's needed before you go to market and you kind of start hiring people, even go for funding. And I think such a great breakdown for the three stages. Now, you built and led high performance sales teams in this entire process. So while you were kind of building a career, you've been involved in so many other different things. So, what are the core principles of hiring, training, and leading a successful SaaS team? And what stage of these three stages should you be looking at hiring?
Yeah, it's such a great question. And, you mentioned the word principles, and I think that is something that I've really laser focused on in my career. One has to have a set of principles that guide them in terms of developing an operational and execution framework. And for me, really, those three pillars I would say are hiring, as you mentioned, then coaching, and then the third would be accountability. So when it comes to hiring, again, it depends on what stage of growth you're at. If you're an early stage startup, I'm really looking for reps that have adaptability, they have grit, and coachability. And at times, I would actually value that over raw experience. Now, if you're a well-developed organization, you're already Series B, Series C, you have large ACV values, then yeah, experience is valuable. But you cannot underscore, that grit and coachability and adaptability at that early stage. And as far as coachability goes, I think, as leaders, we need to ensure that there is structured onboarding and sales enablement so that you best set your team up for success when they do start, and then a framework for ongoing performance optimization. Whether that's doing call reviews, structured 101s, so regular trainings. And that also leans into the third pillar, which is accountability. So accountability is a very big part of what leaders do. Obviously, we have goals, and sometimes they're very lofty goals, and in ensuring that managers can bridge that gap between the strategic vision of the management team and what's actually happening at the field level. And for me, I've always leaned in on leading indicators. I mean, lagging indicators can also be obviously very valuable in determining future outcomes, but it's really looking at the reps' inputs. So, how often do they pick up the phone? How often? What kind of activity are they putting in? What do those response rates look like? And then also the health of your pipeline. So, is the pipeline growing? Is it shrinking? What's the pipeline velocity? What are those conversion rates? So, when you have a good sense on those three pillars, it creates a foundation for a really powerful and high performing culture within the sales org.
Having scaled an agency myself, I know that leading hypergrowth and market expansion can feel like running a marathon at a sprinter's pace, by the way. And it's easy to get caught up in strategy, but once you forget execution and team alignment, it could be the downhill spiral from there. So, in my experience, the most successful leaders I have worked with have a strong ability to coach their teams rather than just manage them. So I think the insights that you've just shared are really critical, and leadership teams must and leaders must make note of it. So looks like that you've developed a really scalable system to kind of scale revenue teams faster. Yeah. So inbound or outbound, let's talk a little bit about that. Most companies when they're starting out, they're all gung ho. They want to go out, as we said, knocking the doors, and then we become complacent, right? And sometimes when we start hiring more people, different mode of operations come into our company. Different people with different experiences come in as well. Most companies, I see that maybe they rely on inbound or outbound. But what is your experience? Where have you seen a good balance, if at all, or what's your favorite?
It's a great question. I think, the answer is all of the above. I think over reliance on a single channel or a single source of lead or demand generation can be, shooting yourself in the foot. I've worked in organizations that are highly inbound reliant, and when the game changes as far as unit economics go of ad spend and the rules that Google or Facebook have, then you start realizing your inbound becomes highly inefficient, highly expensive. Your CAC blows through the roof, and you're not a well-run oiled machine anymore. And then your board's looking at you and saying, "Okay, well, you're growing, but you're not growing sustainably, and it's very dangerous. It's a dangerous path that you're on." Outbound is also quite effective, assuming you already have enough brand awareness and your marketing team is working closely with your sales team to put out great content, and building awareness. Without that, it can be very tricky. I think what we've seen over the last few years is that outbound has become very difficult, because I think buyers have become inundated with emails and cold calls. So you really need to stand out of that noise. You need to focus on hyper personalization. You need to focus on value creation first. And then, there's also the partner channel partnership side and tech partnership side that I think is incredibly valuable. So you have to really kind of do all at once. I don't have a favorite, but I think in my own experience right now, where I'm at, we're seeing tremendous success in our partner and channel sales bucket, so to speak. Specifically because we're in a new market player and a new territory, and establishing relationships with existing players is a lot more effective than, spending time picking up the phone and just doing cold calls.
Yeah, so many companies still struggle with the partnership motion. And I found that, I mean, I was doing, when you do your business plan for the next year, I'm like, what brought us to here? And what are the three things that we did or four things that we did really best? And how could we kind of dial in and, lean into those more and more? And what stood out for us as an agency was community, partnerships, and events. And
Absolutely.
felt that we are so good at going out there, speaking events, creating our own events, webinars. That's how we started our business marketing, and those were GTM is the new term now, has surfaced over the last several years. It used to be marketing. How are you going to market, right? At the end of the day, you knew that these are your different channels that you're going to market. And then I think partnerships are still something that's either not interpreted correctly, because it's not about just getting the referrals and exchange. It's true partnership. So talk to me a little bit about what makes a partnership program truly strategic in your mind, and do you have a success story throughout your tenure that you could share?
So I think it starts with choosing the right partners, like you said. And the way you do that is you have to ensure that you have an aligned ICP. So you're essentially selling to the right target audience, and you have complementary solutions, whether it's a reseller, whether it's an integration or an alliance. It doesn't matter. There has to be some kind of complementary offering or value creation to a similar ICP. And then the second is you have to really focus on enabling them, right? So whether that's cold marketing, conducting training so that they understand your product, your value proposition, how to best position it, in the form of sales books. So effectively leveraging them as somewhat of an offsite sales team. And then there needs to be the right incentives. And this has always been the tricky part. How do we structure deals so that they're, the right commissions and rewards for our partners, so that they are incentivized to, work with us. And there's a plethora of partners out there that they're also working with. So it's about really being able to prioritize your product, your solution. And I could speak to Defigo because this is one of the challenges that, we dealt with when I first joined. Defigo is a Norwegian company, has had tremendous success in Europe. And we were very new to the US and Canadian market. And initially, I had the wrong ICP. I was very focused on selling directly to property managers, trying to understand how do we penetrate, the multifamily owner operator world. But what I realized is that the quickest path to scaling, at least in the beginning, was doubling down on the channel. Because, and without getting too into detail about how our industry works, um, property access control solutions, security solutions are usually sold to and installed by what we call in the industry security integrators. They already have existing relationships with the end user, which is who we're targeting. And they don't obviously build their own products. They choose a product that they like, and then they recommend that to their clients and then install that. And I realized after a couple of months of trial and error that that's exactly where I should be focused on. So similar to what you were just saying, I started attending events. I started putting out content that was tailored and spoke directly to the security integrator. And then we got very lucky that we started forming one or two partnerships that proved to be quite successful. And the way we, nurtured those relationships was from the very beginning, ensure that they understood how our product worked, what made it different. So I really try to understand, okay, hey, as a security integrator, you probably have 50 different intercoms that you could vouch for, sell, why Defigo? What would make it more appealing, more incentivizing for you? And I ran a discovery call like you would with any other lead. And they basically told me what they wanted. And I took that back to our leadership team and crafted a partner program that I think, given our limited resources, was still far more compelling than some of the bigger companies are able to offer. We start off small and you really invest on those one or two partnerships. You make those work, you figure out a repeatable process, and then you can kind of scale that going forward. And that's really what worked for us better than, in my opinion, outbound or inbound at this stage.
Yeah, no, 100%. And it's so profound. You need to understand your buyers, but you need to know them really at a deeper level and say, who is the end consumer? Just a little intel. Maybe we have had some clients who work with multifamily housing, yeah. And sometimes the buying committee in those areas is maybe an administrative person, but at the same time, you went around and said, who else do they buy from? So that's amazing. I love that. Something that we've done over the years, that we kind of, and once we realized that partnership is the motion that we really want to double down on, we created an ideal partner profile. And if you talk about ideal customer profile, you also have to have an ideal partner profile.
Absolutely.
I always say if you can measure it, you can scale it. Many startups focus on revenue as a vanity metric, but ignore, as you said, LTV, CAC, sales efficiency metrics. And looks like that, what you are saying is that sales leaders and founders must obsess over it. As a sales leader, balancing your short-term revenue goals with long-term strategic growth is so critical. So what I found is that many founders push sales teams hard to hit that immediate quotas, but don't invest enough in retention, expansion, and kind of even train, educate, and look at the deeper metrics that are going to lead to that retention and churn. As you said, is one of the metrics, the payback period, and what is happening, the user adoption of your product. Those are the kind of things that we should be looking at. And then aligning the CS team, the sales team, the marketing team, and the product team accordingly. Just that makes that really balancing act in your go-to-market strategy. So as a revenue leader, revenue growth metrics are important. And I want to understand from your standpoint, we've talked about inbound, outbound, what works. It's a combination of both. But scaling sales is one thing, right? But doing it right is important. And where is technology playing that role? And with all the AI buzz and then talking about SDR costs and, AI avatars talking in, we're talking about avatars here. That scares me a little bit. Talk a little bit about your take on technology and how do you integrate as a revenue leader?
There are so many tools and solutions out there. Honestly, at this point, it's even hard to keep track of what's available in the market. And I think you can kind of go down the rabbit hole as a revenue leader, focusing too much of your time and energy on, oh, do I have the right tech stack and what tools should I sign up for? Rather than getting down to what really matters the most is supporting your team, enabling your team, and focus on execution. And especially when you're in an early stage, you might not even have the luxury of having the kind of budget needed to invest in all these tools. I mean, there's so many tools, right? We can talk about sales engagement, BI and analytics, AI and automation. But I like to go to the fundamentals and the basics and kind of build from there. And if there is a tool that we're evaluating, it has to go through a very robust business case that I bring to the leadership team and I say, hey, cost aside, here's the value that will add to the business, and here are the risks. So it is a bit of a balancing act, but I think obviously fundamentally you need a very good CRM. You need to track pipeline velocity and your conversion rates and keep everything organized and have a single source of truth. But I think, in a world where outbound isn't working as effectively as it used to, reps need to spend more time on researching their leads and prospects, and spending more time on going through their notes before they do follow up calls. So as much as you can automate that using technology, in my opinion, that's a good thing. I rather have my reps doing those type of activities than making a lead list or sending out emails that you could automate. So there's really good solutions from Outreach to SalesLoft that can help a little automate some of that outreach capability.
Low producing activities should be automated in your mind, and technology could be leveraged there 100%.
100%. Now, as far as AI goes, I think it's super interesting. It's still fairly premature. I've looked at it. I've looked at AI SDRs. I signed up for one in full transparency because I'm that curious. I think, they're not at a point where I would say, yeah, let's not hire SDRs anymore and just get a bunch of AI agents making calls and you're set. But I think they can help essentially complement your existing team. So, as we're growing in the Americas, we first need to reach a certain level of scale before we start, hiring a huge team. So right now it's me. I have another person supporting me out of our Oslo office, and then I have this AI SDR that I'm currently developing with this company. And once it's ready, I'm excited to try it out. And the idea would be this AI would essentially call our security integrator prospects, do some basic discovery and prompting, and get them. The objective is to book that meeting with me. And in theory, if that could help me basically have more meetings on my calendar and mean I spend less time, building lead lists and doing prospecting and cold calls and sending out emails and more on actually value creation, uh, acting as a subject matter expert, being out in the field, I think that's a really great thing. But I remain cautiously skeptical because we have to see it's still a very new technology. So, all in all, a lot of tools out there. I think you just need to kind of laser focus on the tools that will alleviate that administrative burden, help you automate low level tasks so you can focus on what really drives that needle.
So one of the challenges we've seen, with AI and sales is that while automation, all of this tech stack that you could leverage, low performing tasks that you can automate, and possibly that's the best way to use technology, is all great. But many companies in this process lose the human connection. They automate so much that there's no humanization with the client. And I think as sales leaders, they must use AI, but without making their team feel so robotic, is what my suggestion would be in this entire thing. So measurement, it's so important. While we've talked about LTV CAC ratios, we've talked about, making sure that we are building profitable, sustainable businesses, scaling them really well, scaling the sales teams really well. Scaling sales is one thing. But what are the must track, I'd say, revenue growth metrics that every SaaS founder and what you measure as a sales leader or should obsess over?
There's a ton of metrics out there, and we covered a few of them. But I think the single most important metric by far, my perspective, maybe some people would disagree, is retention.
Mhm.
That will fundamentally tell you a lot about your product market fit and your customer success. And, there can be a lot of reasons as to why your LTV CAC ratio is off or why your pipeline velocity is where it's not, where it shouldn't be. And things are, deals are moving slowly through the pipeline. Those things you can kind of quite easily tweak and fix when you hone in on your sales motions. But customer retention is fundamental because if you work really, really hard and you have an amazing sales team that is able to close deals fast, but you start losing the customers that you've acquired, it's kind of like taking, one step forward, two steps back. So I laser focus on customer retention as the core metric that I'm looking at, and the way we do that is ensuring that sales is very, very closely lined up with customer success. Those aren't two separate divisions; they're not two separate departments. Our objective is exactly the same. We want to acquire customers in a sustainable way, but then we want to maintain and keep those customers long term, help them succeed in why they came to us in the first place, but then also be referrals and champions that help grow our business in the long term. And then, beyond that, I'm very focused on optimizing the performance of my sales team. So I look very closely at conversion rates. I look at conversion between lead stages. I look at pipeline velocity, and then there's more grand level what a CRO would look at, which is really trying to understand for every dollar that I invest in sales and marketing, and how many dollars do I get back, and there's an efficiency that needs to be accounted for. And that's where I would, work very closely with my finance team. So there's, revenue high level, there's sales performance, and then there's very granular at every rep level, I would say.
Leading indicators, lagging indicators. That's how you've broken it down. I love the fact that it looks like that you have some sort of not some sort of, you definitely have an alignment with your customer success teams, because if you're looking at churn, you're obviously looking at as two departments as one in an integrated fashion, and that's where GTM partners, they talk a lot about GTM dashboards.
Mm.
And I love the fact that if organizations can have the GTM dashboard, then that ways you have one single source of truth as to throughout the organization.
Absolutely.
And where the gaps are. Um, Now, what's the average payback that you're looking at these days, at least in your industry?
You want to be under 12 months. That is ideal. I think if you're a little above that, that's fine. But that magic, well, not magic number, but kind of the ideal payback period is anything less than 12 months. You're gold. I think if you're between 12 and 18 months, you're okay. Anything about that isn't so great, the red zone. But I think what makes it also challenging for our business specifically is we're both a hardware and software company. So we have a SaaS component, which is a recurring revenue, and then we have a one-time hardware cost. And hardware is a completely different business, and that was a learning curve for me because I come from a pure SaaS software world and trying to understand how do we, profitably do that. The numbers, economics on that works slightly different, but more or less, I think if you can kind of average it out to less than 12 months, you're golden.
And that is why it's so important to take a look at your churn rates, and that's the overarching number every profitable office
Yes.
must look while they're bringing it net new. Account expansion and churn are, I think, for me, really biggest numbers that sales leaders should be looking at. Well, Omer, you talked a little bit about at the beginning of our call in this, at the beginning of this conversation, mentors, and I want to understand from that standpoint. You've been both a founder and a sales leader. And so, what's the one leadership challenge you faced, and how did you overcome it?
I think, it really comes down to being able to continually motivate your team. And I know a lot of people would disagree, and I've had mentors, my own mentors tell me that motivation is underrated. It's really discipline. But I've challenged that assumption, and I truly believe that as a leader, a very core part of your management framework is how do I continually motivate your team. And one thing that I like to do is I like to read and I like to learn different frameworks from people who are far smarter than I am. And one that I've honed in on is Dan Pink, who is an author. He has a framework on what motivates human beings. And he breaks it down into three. It's autonomy, mastery, and purpose. So when it comes to autonomy, as humans, we want autonomy over the work we do. Yes, we have bosses and managers that we're accountable to, but we want to own the work that we do and feel we actually drive some kind of input into the business. And I think as managers, we can do that by providing ownership through training and enablement and saying, hey, I've set you up for success. You know what your goals are. Now go and deliver. And how you do that, when you do that, I don't tend to micromanage those things. And that's really where trust comes into play too. The second thing is mastery. I think we all want to, get good at what we do, at least most of us. And, for me, I ended up in the world of tech sales. I ended up in the world of revenue leadership. And for me, what motivated me personally was to continually get really, really good at my craft, like a world star athlete, if you will. And that happens through continuous learning and coaching that I got from my leaders and my managers and forming the right communities within, the larger tech ecosystem. And then I would say the last, as Dan Pink says, is purpose, right? So how does your role, what you're doing, whether it's as mundane as picking up the phone every day and making cold calls or sending out emails, to being part of the strategy and decision making, how does that directly tie into the business impact? And if you can make your team realize the impact that they have quantitatively, qualitatively, it gives them a sense of purpose that they're a vital member of this high performing team, and everyone has a purpose to play. So I think that has been tremendous in actually helping me build that culture, a world class culture of high performing, successful sales teams, but also turning around when we go through challenges, whether it's you're going through the pandemic and interest rates have skyrocketed, the consumer demand has shifted. Regardless of what happens externally, internally, if you have the right principles and foundations in place, you can get through some of the worst in the business world.
I agree. And let's say companies put out their core values. It's just a matter of seeing them in action, right? You have to work hard and hire, train according to those core values and those principles. And I think that's where the culture kind of comes together. The purpose is to align everybody on those core values.
100%.
Fantastic. Well, closing advice. I want to hear one piece of advice you'd give an aspiring SaaS leader who's listening in today. What's that one piece of advice?
I would say, if I picked one, is do not confuse short-term competitive advantage with long-term sustainability. And I think that's kind of been a theme of our conversation where we talked a little bit about growing sustainably versus thinking you have product market fit. So you might have built a killer product. You might even have a couple of users that are raving about it, but realize the long-term play here is, your competitors, changes in the market, unit economics, your ability to do so sustainably and profitably. Those are two completely different things. So I would say don't confuse those two things, because I've learned the hard way that that can come in and bite you in the back.
Very good advice. Thank you so much, Umair. This has been such an insightful, packed episode. I thoroughly enjoyed it. You've been very clear, and I'm wishing you much success as you build, grow internationally, and and build more, I'd say, powerful teams throughout your career. So thank you once again for sharing your experience in GTM strategies, sales leadership, and SaaS growth. For our listeners, where can the listeners connect with you and find you and learn a little bit more about your organization?
Absolutely. I mean, hit me up on LinkedIn. Umair Ahmed is my name. If you want to learn more about Defigo, we can be found at getdefigo.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. For our listeners, if you found this episode valuable, I'd invite you to subscribe, leave us a review, make sure that you follow Umair, and share this podcast, Fuel Your Marketing Podcast, with your network. Stay tuned for more insights on scaling your SaaS company. Until next time, I'm your host, Arti, and be well.
Thank you for listening to the Fuel Your Marketing podcast. For more episodes, visit www.fuelyourmarketing.ca.